2016, published by Naughty Dog, originally released for the Sony PlayStation 4, was Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. When the game was released, it was critically praised by both critics and gamers for being a worthy and memorable conclusion to the Uncharted gaming franchise, which had started with the original Uncharted game released nearly a decade previously in 2007 with Drake's Fortune for the Sony PlayStation 3. A theory had it that all of the previous final bosses from the different Uncharted games, being that of Atok Navarro, Zoran, Nazaviek, and Talbot, were all within a set method of fighting dynamics, and were an important premise as a final boss character to the Uncharted games. But information now known had it that not all gamers were happy with the experience in the final battle against Rafe Adler. Compared to the previous boss fights, Rafe's fight was particularly different. The previous fights were more within control of the player in terms of outcomes or strategies, but critics mentioned that the particular fight against Rafe was completely different and somewhat more difficult or arguably annoying to experience, particularly if the player was attempting a speedrun and desired to complete the game as quickly as possible, or if the player was attempting a playthrough of the game on a more difficult setting, as it was extremely difficult, with the movements or actions by Rafe performed by the computer were completely randomized, so there were no technical ways to predict the movements of Rafe, as it was all down to mostly skill or luck during the sword fight. As it was mentioned, the whole premise of fighting against Rafe with swords in the final battle was arguably the hardest and most frustrating boss battle out of any in the original Uncharted series. Criticisms of the final battle even affected some gamers' perceptions of the game, and most were glad to be past that particular fight to conclude the game, as it went further than fans' impressions or reactions to that particular fight. Even the developers of the game were divided on the premise of the sword fight with Rafe, as details have it that some of Naughty Dog's own developers desired a more traditional style of fighting, where weapons would be used between Drake and Rafe, while others went with the sword play to give the final battle against Rafe by Drake a different type of experience of a final boss battle, because that was the last technical game of the original Uncharted series aside from Lost Legacy. A character can be overrated yet hated because gamers dislike the final fight against the character, not the particular character themselves.